You're one of South Africa's sort of best-known technologists, IT guru, and so on.
Like to think so.
Give us a sense of the breadth of your operations. The things I know about are the Fin Week and your 5FM slot, which everybody listens to. I'm sure you do a whole lot of other things. Give us the overview.
I do a lot of professional speaking, get asked to come in and speak at conferences and sort of executive meetings about what's happening with technology and business trends.
Okay.
So I do that, do some consulting work via a firm I've got called Massive Gap. Write a column for IT Web, and there's some other bits and pieces too.
So in effect, you are looking out at what trends critically there are in technology and where this might be of relevance either for companies positioning themselves in the sector or maybe just, big corporates using technology to improve their own business productivity, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, or for nerds who are looking for new toys.
Those people, yes. But you also do quite a lot of international travel. I mean, obviously South Africa at the periphery of Africa, blah, 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 but far away from where the action is. We've got quite a good tech sector and a tech heritage here, but a lot of the stuff involves, equipping yourself by going to international events, no?
Yeah, definitely. So I spend a lot of time going and speaking to representatives from big companies. Every now and then I'll snag a meeting with the CEO. Got to speak to Stephen Elop after he took the helm at Nokia earlier this year.
Ex-Windows, cool. Ex-Microsoft guy, yes. The CEO of Nokia.
Yeah, got to speak to Sam Palmisano in the last 2 years as well, CEO of IBM. Right. So those meetings are worth the trip.
Yeah. And then, of course, in this regard, you're spending a hell of a lot of time on the internet. I mean, I'm thinking...
More than is probably healthy.
Because obviously a lot of the stuff there, I mean, there are websites out there that dedicate themselves to following these trends, some of them from like a design perspective, a technology, software evolution, not only the corporates operating in that space.
Yes, definitely. There's some great sites on there. And, some of the more generalist sites like Seeking Alpha, for example, they carry a lot of great tech content.
Yeah.
If I really want to get technical, sites like Ars Technica, for example, do a great job of analyzing industries and new products and where they're all going.
Yeah. Because, of course, we have a slightly distorted opinion of the importance of technology. I mean, in South Africa, and Africa generally, we use technology if we're able to, but we don't realize just how big a player it is in terms of the market capitalization of particularly the US exchange. If you look at the S&P 500, technology is huge in that space. Yeah,
a lot of latency in the local market and in Africa in general, and then this expectation internationally of growth. And when's it going to happen? How's it going to happen? How do we cut out our slice of the pie? So a lot of interest in what's happening in Africa at the moment. A lot of guesswork as to how one captures that market. And that makes for a lot of interesting discussions around where we're going.
And by latency, you mean people can see that these technologies are going to have application down here in time once the bandwidth improves and so on. It's a question of like working out when and who and which steps get leapfrogged and so on.
They're watching the growth of the middle class. They're watching technology getting cheaper all the time and more accessible. And they're wondering when exactly does this African market take off in a big way.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to come back in a minute to the issues of, investable trends. But there's something that has really interested me, and, everybody that's watching this show tonight is watching it in their lounges, on their couches, watching television. The global trends indicate that TV watching is becoming, even more popular than it was, if that's possible. People are watching more and more television. And yet, of all of the technologies that appear to be being disrupted out there, be it, telephony and, social media and all that, TV seems to be the most enduring and the most unchanged.
Yeah.
So what is going on in the TV space, and why is it that these initiatives like Apple TV, Google TV, and so on don't seem to be getting much traction?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, firstly, we're living in the golden age of television. But the reason that we're seeing listenership spike is because we're getting better quality content than we ever have before. Right. And the studios have all collectively poured more money into content than ever. So it started with shows like 24, Desperate Housewives, Lost, and it just escalated and snowballed from there. Now there are so many fantastic shows with these massive budgets. I mean, a show like Lost had the same budget for a single episode as some movies do,
Wow.
So great quality content, but then hanging on to this archaic licensing model where we treat the world as these different territories that don't speak to each other. We slice the content up into windows and we go, okay, the US market gets it first, then we have, DVD release windows, paid television windows, but just this very obscure way of looking at the world, of segmenting it, and just discrediting the fact that our consumers are speaking to each other. So, I'm in South Africa and I'll have a show, let's say Game of Thrones, for example. I don't believe it's been screened here yet, but my friends in the States have already seen it. They've been tweeting about it.
MasterChef Australia, everyone was mad about, and everybody knows who the winner was, and you had to ignore it.
Yeah.
So
you're going, guys, it's 2011. We're all speaking to each other. We know what's happening. Why don't you give us the content at the same time? And they come with very good arguments about, you know, how they've built their business models out of these airtime windows and a specific view on content licensing. But why hasn't TV changed? Not because the technology isn't disruptive. It's massively disruptive. This piracy, which they're misreading as malicious intent and criminal intent, which is really just people giving up and going, I can't get your content any other way, so I'm going to get it from BitTorrent in better quality, faster, without adverts. That's the way I want to consume it. The technology is there, it's disruptive, but the reason that we haven't seen the industry applying itself to that technology, I think, is because of these old world sort of models around licensing.
Yeah. Okay, so in Africa, we know we've got the DSTV signal as the dominant player for the sort of upper end of the market, and we know that they've got a content acquisition strategy and everything kind of works with that. And they are looking at, you know, different platforms, different delivery systems. They've got their box office thing. Do you think that at the point when universal cheap bandwidth is available, that whole model gets disrupted and people start watching YouTube content and, you know, downloaded content and the sort of distribution system? Who wins in that ultimate model?
Well, it depends. I mean, it's a very different discussion in Africa than what it would be in the USA. So let's look at the American market, for example. And there, the studios have realized that they're fighting a losing battle against piracy and against people distributing their content. And so what they've done is they've freed it up. So ABC, for example, when Lost was still running, you could go onto their website, you could watch full episodes of Lost the day after it had aired, no problem. But if you try and access that website from South Africa, blocked off to you because they're geolocating you. So a DSTV, for example, not being a big generator of content and relying on the ABCs of the world to generate the content for them, looks at this all from a completely different view. You know, ABC is going, we'll find other ways to monetize this. Let's give our consumers what they want. Let's play a ball with Apple and iTunes because getting $4 an episode is better than nothing. But DSTV is going, we're just a conduit for this stuff. So how do we reinvent ourselves? And I don't have a conclusive answer for them. I think that developing more local content is possibly part of the strategy, but then also looking at how they can become a player in this new value game, because those stores of value have shifted, and they need to stay relevant in this whole scenario or die.
Here's another focus question. If the assumption is that most of the stuff that's going to come into you is going to come through a mobile LTE type signal, is it not the case that the mobile phone companies are in quite an attractive position because they can bill you on a variable basis while you're using your connection to BitTorrent to download your fancy video content? You still keep your DSTV because you kind of have to, but these things start to become possible. And
that's why we've seen these operators try to become stores of value in themselves, become big players in the transactional space. There have been suggestions from some that they should go for banking licenses and become, you know, big-time transactional layers. I mean, the problem for them is they're scared of becoming just plumbing. You know, they don't want to be the guys that just pass content from point A to you at point B. They need to stay relevant in the center of that. That's why they've tried to develop their own content stores. That's why we've seen, for example, Vodacom and MTN launching app stores. They need to stay relevant in that whole content game. The question is trying to create their own repositories of applications and content the right strategy? Do they need to focus on the transactional layer and maybe look at things like operator billing and making it easier for you to pay for your content? How do they stop from being plumbers in this all?
Okay, fascinating, but unfortunately we're going to run out of time. In terms of the investment environment that you see out there with technology, you know, we said earlier that in African markets we're rather restricted in our access to companies other than those that just do distribution type stuff. But globally, what's your most favored investment kind of theme within technology? Acknowledging that this thing is such a mess and such a dynamic environment that it's very you can very easily kind of get seduced by one opportunity, the next thing they've been bypassed. What appeals to you most? I mean, the software companies, the hardware guys, the smartphone makers, the Oracles of the world, the database developers, the mobile companies. Which appeals to you most of all? Okay,
well, let's start with the rational answer, and then I've got some crazy ideas as well. So look at IBM, for example. This is a company that has been through this all in the 90s. They pushed anything that looked like a commodity out of their business. Not only things that looked like commodities, but things that looked like they could be commodities one day. So example, DRAM. IBM was making a killing out of DRAM when it got rid of the whole business. business, sold it off and said this is going to commoditize one day. We cannot be.
Interesting.
So you look at what's happened at IBM since. It's seen 12% growth year on year. It's a fantastic time for investors in IBM. There's nothing that even remotely resembles a commodity in that business. It's fully globalized. Its reporting structures going to one central core in the States. It's a good time to have a company like IBM. Proven, tested, sound business model, adjusted itself long before any of this nonsense in the market started. So there's an option like that.
Right.
Then if you want to have some fun, there's LinkedIn, there's the Zynga
social
IPO.
Media guys.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're seeing bubbles here, but we all know there are opportunities in bubbles, right? Because these companies are trading on valuations.
As long as you get into them while they're still inflating.
Yes. And I think where we'll see the bubble start to, get under unbearable pressure is within months of the Facebook IPO, which we're expecting next year. Until Facebook lists at good times for LinkedIn and Zynga and all of these companies that have managed to convince us of these massive values. So one could have some fun there.
Simon, thanks so much. It's been
Thanks,
great
Paul.
chatting to you. We'll see you again soon.